Hi, I'm back, more or less. Uh, I'm going to make a couple of videos this afternoon. I made it two on Friday and uh, posted one Friday and one just now today, which is Sunday. So I don't know when I'll post these or in what order or any of that stuff. But while I had some thoughts fresh in my mind, I was relatively calm. I wanted to go ahead and put something out there to my few but loyal subscribers, which I probably have one less loyal fan slash subscriber now than I did prior. One of my biggest fans, but alas, you know, Friday, as I pointed out on my last music video, was the day of transformation, and I also said something like, "Through pain we learn." I'm sure I didn't coin that. And I agree with those sentiments, and it was. And I'm trying not to look backward over the last week too much. Sometimes things that you think are true or real are uh, coming to life for you in your life, uh, are actually not. Actually, fate is kind of conspiring against you, and you're losing your grip on the very thing you think is starting to go right for you. And it just kind of all goes horribly wrong really quickly and abruptly. So that's as much my fault as anyone else that I interact with or have any kind of collaboration with of any kind. But I did a video about more or less about some of this on Friday, about um, not much soul left to bear. So that's my long, lengthy preamble. I'm not going to talk about my personal stuff today. I am chilling out in my living room. My hair's out of control. This kid at work told me that he liked my hair. I looked like a, how did he put it? A mad scientist rock star. And as they say, I'll take that. Um, anyway, listening to one of my favorite bands, Thin Lizzy, right now. Finally got a hold of a complete copy of Renegade. I might talk more about that on the music video. But right now, the song Angel of Death is playing. This is the heaviest song I'd ever heard in my life. When I heard it, I swear. It's just intensely powerful about Nostradamus' prophecies and just, oh man, the end of things. Great stuff. Anyway, save that for a music video, but the tone is appropriate. So I'll cut to the chase. 3 minutes on, I just finished Breaking Bad. So no, I mean I just finished watching the entire series of Breaking Bad. I mean I've probably broken bad a number of times, but not just now. Um, and the last one I did on Breaking Bad kind of got lost in the sea of Breaking Bad videos, and that's cool. I kind of knew what I was setting myself up for there. Um, but I covered the first 3 seasons, and I guess went through the basic, plot points, the bullet points, and you know, so I finished season 5, the final season today. I've been working on seasons 4 and 5 ever since I posted that last video. In between this Godzilla box set, I'm still working through, which is pretty magnificent. Which I did a whole show on that too. Check that out. Breaking Bad, I guess it put me in the mood to want to do a kind of a soul searching video in a way, because the ending was uh, it was powerful, man. It was like what I'd kind of, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who would live, who would die. I didn't know how bad things were going to continue to get for our protagonist, Walter White, aka Heisenberg, the legendary Heisenberg, played by Bryan Cranston, who's won about a zillion acting awards for it. I think officially he's won about, I can't remember, 8 or 9, and been nominated for like 20 something. But I could be wrong. I could be off on that. But I know he's won the Emmy for the role like 4 times at least. And then our co-star, Aaron Paul, the great Aaron Paul, who plays Jesse Pinkman, the hapless meth dealing kid who gets he kind of sucks Walter in to his world, and then Walter his world becomes much darker, and then Jesse's kind of trapped in that world and can't get out. At least that's how I view the arc of the show. Aaron Paul also won a bunch of awards, Emmys, and et cetera, satellites, Saturns, maybe, I don't know. But he deserved all of them. If they could have given an Oscar and a Tony to these two guys, just crossing over media, then they should have done it. Maybe an honorary Oscar. So no, I don't care much about Oscars. But I think Emmy is fair enough. I mean, we don't have like a Cannes Film Festival kind of really, or Silver Bear, or any of those kind of really legitimate awards that other countries do that are for the merit of one's work. Oscars and such are kind of popularity contests and commercial validation and a bit of inside industry kind of glad handling, and sometimes a work of quality, as I've said this before, will align between the public's taste and like for it, its success, as in a large audience, financial success, popularity, and the quality of it. And even more rarely, those two things will align with my own personal taste. So Breaking Bad is definitely a good example of the latter. It kind of, the stars were right. Vince Gilligan created something really powerful. It was really a portrait of two people, Walter and Jesse, but mainly Walter. Jesse is the necessary foil, the necessary tragic character that's kind of orbiting Walter's descent into a dark world and ascent to becoming a criminal mastermind, kingpin type, even with the shaven head. And in that sense, the show did shape up by season 4 to be how I was expecting or wanting, I guess. I had kind of gotten the impression just from the little echoes I'd picked up along the way over the years of the show's content and the few episodes I'd seen, that Walter was going to go from this kind of, tragic, downtrodden guy into this guy trying to make money selling meth and making meth, and always failing, being stymied along the way. But somehow luck would, win out at the very end of a horrible scenario, and he would barely survive, usually by the fact that he's addicted to lying. And he's really obsessed with lying. He can't help himself. If there's a chance for a lie, even if it's something innocuous that won't get him in any trouble, he'll just fabricate a story right then and there. And the first episode, he's practicing lying to his wife, but it's kind of funny. And they flash back on that in one of the last episodes of the whole series, of him doing that. But, the thing is, so I thought Walter, the way it was getting by season 3, where you have a true kingpin kind of character, the Mr. Big guy of the whole methamphetamine business in Southwest America, Gustavo Fring, played by the brilliant Giancarlo Esposito, who's had a long and awesome career in still is getting high profile work and just knocking it out of the park, so to speak. I'm not even a sports fan. Um, but he was kind of the prime mover. So, Walter had gotten to a certain point based on his reputation as being the greatest cook of methamphetamine. He had this kind of blue crystal product that was the result of his master of chemistry. And as the show goes on, you realize that he is brilliant. He is like a failed, when I say failed, I mean financially, the way society deems success. When the show starts, he's a failed, brilliant scientist. In other words, he had one shot at being making money off his talent of being a kind of a Bill Gates like character. Well, okay, maybe that's a bad example because Walter actually is brilliant, unlike Bill Gates. But um, however, Walter's partner, Schwartz, he's kind of the Bill Gates kind of guy. Um, and Schwartz and his wife, Gretchen, who was Walter's girlfriend first, they made a fortune off Walter's brilliance because Walter didn't have any business savvy, and he sold his stock in the company that he named, Gray Matter, for $5,000. The Schwartzes became billionaires. This kind of reminds me of the comics industry. It reminds me a lot of Superman, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, and I think they sold Superman to DC for $100, maybe 1,000, but 100. Or the movie Harder They Come. Ivan O. Martin uh, sells his record for $20. He doesn't even think it's that fair, but he has no choice. Then the record becomes played all over Jamaica as he becomes a literal outlaw and a criminal. So maybe Walter's story and Ivanhoe's have a tiny parallel throughout the over cross cultures and decades. Um, but that's where the similarities end. Uh, Ivanhoe's more like a punk rock kind of guy, reggae guy. He's a character. He's a larger than life character. He was based on a real outlaw in the 50s in Jamaica called Ryjan. And um, and the legends of like Stagger Lee and these kind of the African American legends and like the tricksters like Dolomite, which these stories later were used by Rita Ray Moore as the foundation of his comedy oeuvre. Um, there's a great chapter on all of this latter stuff I'm talking about in a book like Grail Marcus. I think it's Midnight Train, but I could really be wrong. But it's the book where he has an incredible book, Lipstick Traces, where he traces punk rock and the Sex Pistols' rise and end, and puts it in the context of like other revolutionary movements and situationist philosophies and Dada art. But Grail Marcus did another book about Elvis and the phenomenon of Elvis, and the crossing over of the some would say nowadays whitewashing, I guess, of black music, or what they called in America in the 40s and 50s race records, in those enlightened times, and essentially Elvis kind of was truly a fan of that stuff, and it did influence him, and he made the idiom super popular commercially. I'm not an Elvis fan, by the way, just for the record. There's a few of those sacred cows I'm not. I'm kind of indifferent to, or dislike. Elvis, I'm indifferent to. Michael Jackson, I actually dislike. So I'm really kind of way out there, huh? I'm not your average American. But that book is great, and it has a couple chapters on these kind of black archetypal um, rebel kind of characters. I talk about Ryjan and then talk about Ivanhoe Martin. They even talk about the movie Across 110th Street, interestingly enough, which is just one of the greatest blaxploitation movies ever. Ready to get the Blu-ray. If someone gives me $1 million. Um, but anyway, that's kind of what Ivan Martin is. Walter White is very white. He's kind of like liberal white America, except the dream failed him. You know, his buddies, the Schwartzes he went to college with, they came out on top. You know, they came out on the top of the baby boomer generation, and they want for nothing materially. Walter ended up being a high school chemistry teacher, and there's no shame in that. But within Walter's mind, there's always that failed uh, opportunity. And you know, we learn some of this early in the show, and then it kind of simmers and goes on to the back burner. But in the last two episodes, really, uh, it comes to the fore, kind of raging to the fore, because you realize that that's kind of the root of his inferiority complex. You know, feeling downtrodden. He's trying to do the best for his family, his wife, his son who has cerebral palsy, and who I would say he loves his son probably more than anyone on earth. And their connection is beautiful, but like all things in Walter's life, it unravels when all these lies are finally brought out. And you know, it takes till about halfway through the final season, season five, before the main characters, other than his wife, played by Anna Gunn, Skylar, other than his wife, who learned earlier, all the other major characters in his family and such begin to learn the truth, including his DEA brother-in-law, Hank Schrader, who's a character that I was instinctively kind of, you know, expecting to hate. Not into the DEA, and I'm not into the war on drugs. You know, none of that kind of macho, you know, crap. But to the credit of the writers and Vince Gilligan, the creator of the characters, and Dean Norris, the actor, you do start to feel for Hank. You do see his perspective. You realize, oddly though, even though at first in the series he seems to be kind of picking on Walter for being kind of an egghead or a brainiac, he actually has deep respect for Walter's intellect and his ability to solve problems. And that's another element of Walter that trips through the series and becomes crystal clear, especially in season three and into season four, where, like I said, he's working for Gustavo Fring. He's cooking meth alongside Jesse for him. And this guy has an international, well, he has a national network, but it touches on international. Uh, but Walter gets in a bad spot with Gustavo, and Gustavo, you know, is basically going to dispatch Walter when he's done with him. He's going to use Jesse as his cook, and you know, he kind of takes Jesse under his wing, which seems unlikely at first. Gustavo thinks Jesse is a worthless junkie with no discipline, and a lot of people write Jesse off. That's kind of the story of Jesse. But before I go into more of that, pull back a little bit. Sorry, I got to reel myself in a bit. My point being is that everything seems stacked against Walter in this Gustavo scenario. You know, his life's in danger. His wife knows about it. She's angry at him all the time, though she's actually starting to participate in some of the criminal activity, like the money laundering. And Walter's got to get out of this. And just like the other incidences to the series, like when Jesse and Walter get trapped in the desert in their RV, have no way to get back to civilization, Walter's intellect gets them out. He literally creates a battery to use in the vehicle, just with his ingenuity and the parts he has, and just elbow grease. And he's got that MacGyver kind of thing where he can kind of find ordinary objects or anything that he can relate to scientifically and put together a way out of a problem. And like I said, he's put upon up to the point where the Gustavo thing blows open, and pun intended, it does blow open. Then he decides to go into business for himself. Jesse really doesn't want to be part of it anymore, but he does for a while as even partners, and Mike Ehrmantraut, who's kind of a Mr. Fix-It guy for Gustavo, and occasionally for the lawyer Saul Goodman, played by Bob Odenkirk, who's kind of the comedy relief, sort of the show. Cool character. So he got his own show after this, playing Saul. So Walter, by season 4, he does become the Kingpin character. Heisenberg is a legend, and he is feared. And that's what I thought was going to happen eventually, that eventually he was going to manage to get out of so many bad situations against all odds, where you're kind of like wincing, and even though he does some horrible things, you're like pulling for him, kind of. You feel sorry for him because you know about his tragedies in his mind, about the cancer and being fucked over by those people and everything. But when he gets rid of Gustavo, his confidence, starts feeling immortal. You know, his cancer is still in remission. His confidence is enormous, and he really thinks he can get out of anything. And of course, he got over his fear of death, you know, in season 1. So he does become that character. That's the Heisenberg character, the legend, you know, and as exemplified by him when he wears the black big shades and the little black hat. That's kind of the signature Heisenberg kind of look, you know, and it's been, you know, cartooned and caricatured countless times since as the show went on, and ever since. Kind of a pop culture shorthand for Breaking Bad and Heisenberg. There's a great ad where he says, "Remember my name," for season 5, and he's, you know, just kind of at the peak of his power as this kind of kingpin of meth. So here's where things kind of break open, and I'm a little fuzzy just by memory of specifics. Even though it's been only a couple of days and weeks. I can't remember where I left off in season 3 and what the cliffhanger was in season 3, but I know in season 4 we're moving into the ending of the Gustavo story, into the next phase. I think season 4 probably pretty much is that arc, if I remember correctly. So Gustavo becomes a more and more important character, and Giancarlo's performance is pretty fascinating. He's very, you know, buttoned down and inattentive and very, you know, kind of tense and poised, very precise. Probably a Virgo, but he's very, you know, attention to detail and careful about how he presents himself in public. He kind of lives a double life, like Walter, as he tells Walter in an episode, you know, "I like you, hide in plain sight," and he does, you know, and he's brilliant at it. No one has any clue that this guy owns 14 Mexican restaurant franchises. Is this, you know, master drug overlord. His company, the Polos Pellegrinos, or whatever, the restaurants, they also have ties to a German company called Madrigal. So Gustavo has holdings there. And one thing we find out, season 5, the final season, kind of begins with we go from looking at Gustavo, now that he's out of the way, and I'll get to that, to Madrigal. Because we see how far the tentacles of this thing, because in season 4, Walter, against all odds, has managed to bedevil or, you know, or set up or outright kill or turn against each other all of the forces against him. The drug cartel in South America, which is led by this cat, played by Stephen Bauer. A little bit of end casting there. You know, he was Manolo in Scarface. And, you know, he's really Cuban, and his character only speaks in Spanish. And kind of the co-head of that organization is this old man played by Mark Margolis, who also was in Scarface. He played the guy who was going to kill the kid, and, you know, Tony's like, no children, and he blows his head off. Margolis has been in and out of the show. You know, he's in a wheelchair. He can't talk at all. He communicates by ringing this bell uh, which gives Walter a really amazing idea, because he's kind of to the point where he's fearing for his life all the time. Walter is from Gustavo. We start to get a little bit of confidence, not confidence, sympathy in Gustavo because we see a protracted flashback where he and his boyfriend, a white guy, I didn't catch the character's name, but it's not blatant, but yet it is obvious they're lovers and they're partners. Um, and they are getting set up in business with uh, Stephen Bauer's character. I think his name's Elgardia or something. I forgot. My friend Sean Lee Levin can correct me on this. But Bauer and Margolis, their characters are kind of forcing them to go in business under them. Now, I had a disadvantage watching this, so I watched this on my friend's account. My friend Dwayne set up a Plex account for me. He's on Plex, so I have access to a lot of shows that I can watch for free. That a lot of which I wouldn't normally necessarily watch, pay money for, I should say. So a little more mainstream, but that I'm curious about, and he's given me enormous access, and I'm in his debt for doing that. He's helped me a lot with seeing shows and movies. That's where I'm watching Breaking Bad is on Plex. The bad thing about Plex is, unlike the broadcast episodes, there's no subtitles. So the portions of the show, they're all in Spanish. I have no idea what they're saying. Occasionally I'll catch part of a sentence or something. So saying that, I don't know the exact mechanics of the deal that went down. But I do know that the Stephen Bauer drug warlord murdered Gustavo's lover in front of him and threatened to kill him and pushed him to the ground face down, and he watched like his lover's like blood and brains kind of drool out into the pool. His life kind of ebb away. So we started to get an idea that Gustavo has. There's been a hint that he has an honorable side, that he's not quite your average, ruthless, uh, kingpin like the Bauer character or Cole's character, who are both thoroughly vile. So Gustavo is constantly trying to make these kind of deals and workarounds with these people. And like I said, some of it I don't catch because I don't know Spanish. This all started because, Walter employed Saul Goodman as his lawyer. And Saul, like I said in the last installment of this video, he's like kind of a shyster and a character and, fast talker, and he's got like a million cell phone burner phones, and he's, always kind of helping out very dubious personages out of trouble with the law. It's kind of what he does. And so, Walter and Jesse take him on full time because they're making quite a lot of money under Gustavo. They're finally making a good amount of money. I mean, before they would make a good amount of money, and then something horrible would happen, and they'd have to spend the money to get themselves out of a jam or something. So that's less so in season 4. It's a bit more lucrative, and Walter's kind of coming clean for the most part with Skylar, and she's starting to kind of, I don't want to say forgive him, but maybe be resigned to it all, and she doesn't want the family to know, especially Hank, the DEA agent. And so she's laundering his money through a dummy business they create, which is a car wash. Goodman wanted them to do a laser tag store, but they went with the car wash, and this is successful. And Skylar enjoys the benefits of the money too, and she's, Walt moves back in with her, and they occasionally get intimate, but it's not like it was. But there's an uneasy thing going on. But once she realizes the extent of Gustavo and how powerful he is, and how what an X factor he is, she obviously fears for her family's life, and rightfully so. Walter becomes super paranoid, and First thing that happens is he gets a cook working beside him when he first gets set up with Gustavo. And this guy's name is Gail Bennick. And he's kind of a jovial, nerdy guy and also a chemistry genius. And they get along pretty well. Occasionally, Walter, he has such a super opinionated, kind of know-it-all view of things because he is brilliant and he has a precise way of doing things, and that's caused a lot of tension in the past with him and Jesse. And he's really treated Jesse kind of rough, called him an idiot and bullied him. And of course, he has helped Jesse too. When Jesse hit the skids after love of his life, Jane died, a death which could have been prevented by Walter. But Walter chose to let her die, choking on her own vomit from her overdose, because she was blackmailing Walter and was going to ruin his enterprise. Jesse still doesn't know this, right? So the thing with Gail goes the way it does, and Walter manipulates Jesse into doing the first really, really awful thing Jesse's had to do. I mean, Walter's already killed some people, here and there, and Jesse has avoided outright taking a human life. Well, he commissions Jesse to murder Gail, and he does. And from then on, Jesse's not really the same person anymore. A series of things happen to him, and it's the attack by Hank was one thing where we learned how void his life is and how much he's hurting inside, especially after Jane's death, how alone he is. And like I said in the last video, I cried when he gave that speech in the hospital, and I'm about to cry thinking about it. This guy's a motherfucker of an actor. He's got more of this coming as the series comes to an end. He's just inexhaustible emotional depth and lots of tears and anguish. So he does this, and he becomes Walter's cook, assistant reluctantly under Gustavo, and they're always keeping an eye on them, and it's tense, and things start to go kind of weird with Jesse and Walter. They have this kind of, I don't know, they have this weird kind of relationship. Walter's still kind of the boss. He's still kind of bullying Jesse. And Jesse gets involved with a girl named Angela, who he meets in his Narcotics Anonymous, when he did go clean for quite a while after Walter kind of saved him from Skid Row. He eventually falls off the wagon for good, but he meets her there, and they become lovers. At first, he's trying to sell her meth. He's trying to sell some of the meth that he and Walter make on the side with his two buddies, who are those bumbling characters we see throughout the show. And it's blanking on their names right now. Badger, is that one of the names? Badger and Skinny Pete or something like that. Okay, fans can hate on me now for my lack of memory. They're like, those are my Badger's, my man. It's my favorite character, motherfucker. But so yeah, and Angela has a young son. And so Jesse kind of starts kind of shacking up with them, and it's not as intense a flame as with Jane, but she's a really cool person, and she's pretty nice looking. I actually think she's nicer looking in my taste than Kristen Ritter, but that's just me. Kristen Ritter doesn't look bad or anything. I'm just saying, the woman has more the kind of earthy and Hispanic. Oh gosh, just kind of exotic look, very beautiful hair. Whereas Jane was kind of had the kind of goth, mall goth kind of hot topic kind of look, and more of a hipster. Andrea is just kind of an earthy woman raising her child in poverty. So Jesse starts helping them out money wise, and he becomes fond of the kid. So Walter realizes that Gustavo, or he believes Gustavo, is going to have him done away with. And this is where we start getting a lot of intrigue with Mike, and Mike starts to become a more prominent character. He kind of is intimidating Walter, and he's kind of he's very stoic, and he's an aged man. He's probably in his late 60s, played by Jonathan Banks, and this character is just he's pretty funny. I mean, but he always just very terse. You don't want to fuck with Mike. You know, he always gets everything and all the job done, no matter what it is. You know, hit a cleanup, some kind of fraud. He's always there to bail out Saul Goodman's interests, or really on a larger scale, his real boss, Gustavo's interests. And Walter seems to threaten Gustavo's interests. So Walter manipulates Jesse again, uh, fearing for his and his family's life, and he exposes this kid to a lily of the valley flower that the kid has a massive allergic reaction to and seems to be dying. But he makes it look as though what poisoned him was a capsule of this poison ricin, which Walter devised in season one to get rid of, to try to get rid of Tuco with. And he was also kind of telling Jesse to poison Gustavo with it. But that's yeah. He was telling Jesse to poison Gustavo with it. So Jesse has it inside of a cigarette in a pack of cigarettes, and he's kind of waiting for his moment. And you don't know if he's really going to poison poison Gus or not, because, like I said, Gus kind of takes Jesse under his wing in a weird way. But it's all playing into this plan. Gus is putting them against each other. You know, he doesn't want Walter in his way. I guess Walter's too ambitious, and he's Walter. He's kind of I don't know. They have a mutual respect, but it starts to kind of dwindle. Him and Gustavo. At first, I like their kind of interaction, almost a friendship, their complicity. But Gustavo gets weary of Walter, and he threatens, that he's going to get rid of them and he's going to replace them with this guy Victor, who's just like this annoying thug guy that he has following them all the time. So Victor's been watching them cook, and he starts to cook a whole batch of meth in front of all of them. And then, Walter's trying to kind of barter for his and Jesse's life, and Gustavo just, puts on some protective clothes like a hazmat and slits Victor's throat wide open and just kills him in front of them to make a point, to send a message, or maybe because he didn't like the fact that Victor was so presumptuous that he could create the blue meth, like Walter and Jesse. So it does the trick. So from then on, it's like Walter's like, Jesse, poison this guy the first chance you get. And so what he does is he gives this kid the flower, and he has a massive allergic reaction. This kid named Brock, this Andrea's 10-year-old son. I'll mention before. Jesse can't find the cigarette containing the ricin anymore, so he believes that Gustavo stole it and poisoned the kid in order to hurt Jesse, make a point, scare them, and it lends credence to Walter's story that not only is Gustavo trying to kill him, but he's also trying to kill Jesse. And Walter needs Jesse completely on his side. And he's already got Jesse kind of in the pocket, having killed Gale. So this is, Walter's starting to do more and more contemptible things. And Jesse is becoming even more of a tragic, kind of broken character. So, Walter can't really get out of the thing with Gustavo, though. I mean, he does manage to his little bait and switch with the ricin cigarette and the flower. He actually stole the ricin cigarette and gave it to Saul. So Saul was his accomplice on this. But anyway, the impression this creates in Jesse's mind is, we've got to get rid of Gustavo. And so the two of them collaborate, and Walter really can't find get Gustavo alone or get an opportunity to kill him. You know that he's got cameras everywhere monitoring their work in the lab. He's tailing them. You know, Mike's keeping an eye on them. Everything's becoming increasingly paranoid, and Skylar's like kind of losing her mind over this, and you know, thinking her family's gonna get whacked. So Walter kind of has this master stroke, and he approaches the aged guy Hector, played by Mark Margolis, in the nursing home, and he said, you know, Mark Margolis hates him because he thinks that wrongly that Walter or Heisenberg killed Tuco. Actually, Hank killed Tuco, and Gustavo had already steered these two insane twin brothers away from Walter and onto Hank. And of course, Hank got shot 4 times, and he had a hard time, long time recovering. They thought he might not walk again. Walter took his money, you know, from his meth dealing, and paid for all of the surgery. I think I covered this a little in the last episode, where this is the kind of story that's uniquely American, and it's really more relevant now than ever, because you just had a Congress that voted against Medicare for all in the middle of a global pandemic. That can't really be overestimated. And a president who said he would veto it in the middle of a global pandemic. Of course, they just knocked $15 minimum wage out, which would really have helped me a lot. But that's for another video. But yeah, they don't have the kind of money that they have to go out of network to get the kind of physical therapy that Hank needs so he can walk again. So Skylar and Walt give them the money, and Skylar invents the story that Walt's a gambling addict, and he somehow hit it big with this mathematical formula, which sounds plausible because of Walt being such a brainiac. And so all this thing is kind of drawing to this, it's tense, you know, and it's wearing down Walter and Jesse. And so Walter does approach Hector in the nursing home, and he's like, you know, there's a man you hate more than me, and it's Gustavo. And Gustavo has already visited Hector, and you know, he's pretty much, Gustavo has engineered a takedown of the Stephen Bauer guy and all those cartel characters in South America. So essentially, Gustavo's moved up the food chain. He got his revenge on them for killing his lover, for compromising him, and forcing him into this life. And now he's the only one left is Hector, and Hector can't do anything because he's like frozen and you know, can't talk, can't move really much. And Gustavo torments him. He visits him in the nursing home to torment him. And it's very exquisite revenge for Gustavo. But it gives Walter the clue that that's the only place Gustavo goes that's kind of off the grid. And so at one point when Gustavo comes to visit Hector, he Walter's wired his wheelchair and a powerful explosive under his wheelchair that's going to be triggered when Hector does his usual little ringing the bell that I mentioned earlier. And Gustavo starts to realize what's happening all too late, and it blows up this guy, Cat Tyrus, who's kind of like you know, newer bodyguard, equally annoying as Victor of Gustavo. Kills Tyrus, we assume blows Hector to bits, and Ground Zero. Gustavo walks out of the room, and here we get a really great example of K&B, you know, Nicotero and makeup company. They're kind of the heirs to Savini. They're kind of like the top, you know, and they helped develop Walking Dead, and they worked on Day of the Dead. It was one of their first gigs. They're very, you know, they're masters of what they're doing, and they get a lot of work, obviously. But they do the makeup on this show, so finally you get to see some of the makeup brilliance, kind of like you saw in Day of the Dead. And then Gustavo walks out of the nursing home room, and you just see him from the side. And when you turn to see the one side, you know, he's kind of walking and straightening his tie because, you know, he's always so mannered and stuffy. But then you see that the side of his face has been blown open. You know, it's deep all the way to the back. You know, no eye, skull's, you know, cracked open, and there's just like a yawning void of bloody tissue. his whole side of his face like Two-Face or something. And man, that's some incredible makeup. But that was a powerful scene. And so what this does is it moves everything into overdrive. And as we go into season 5, Walter and Mike and Jesse become partners, and in a new venture. Jesse wants out, altogether, you know. But they decide that the three of them kind of deal with things. Mike's not happy because of what Walter did to Gustavo and everything that Walter's done and his kind of general manipulative nature. Walter's kind of feeling on top of the world, and they do make an arrangement with the German holding company, Madrigal. And it turns out that Madrigal was intimately linked in with Gustavo's meth dealing on an international scale, and that was administered by a character named Lydia. I can't remember the actress, Laura something, but I've seen her before, and she has this kind of winsome, kind of delicate, pretty look, but her character's really tense and uptight, and she's a real master player herself, and she's kind of been in charge of keeping this tie between Madrigal and Gustavo's organization and all of the meth flowing and going. And she knows like too much to live, pretty much. And Mike even threatens to kill her at a couple of points, and she always manages to get out of it. But she basically puts them to work for a little while, and they start making a good amount of money. And then something goes wrong. They have kind of the mother load here, and they have a new guy who's kind of just a flunky helping them out, named Todd, and they're in the desert, and they manage to pull all this off, and this little kid on a bike sees them, and Todd just reflexively shoots him to death. And when Jesse sees this, you feel like another little piece of Jesse's like soul is dying. So he's out. He splits, and he hates Todd obviously, but he kind of hates Walt for the whole getting it all going and being involved with him. And Mike is out too. And then you kind of have the scenario where Walt goes into business by himself under Sylvia, and a lot of their product is not only going to go to the American Southwest, but it's going to go to the Czech Republic. So international connections come into play, and but his assistant is this kid Todd. So that's a good way to keep Jesse alienated, I guess. But Walter doesn't care. He's ruthless. He's totally ruthless at this point. And at this point, I was thinking, well, what's going to happen next? And for God's sake, what the hell? And then all of a sudden, in a couple episodes, you see some time pass, maybe a couple months or whatever, and you see that finally Walter, in this new arrangement under Sylvia with Todd, running this lab himself and being the boss, he's finally made a fortune, huge amount of money, and they use the car wash as the front to launder it, and Skylar's not quite as unhappy with things as she was, because her kids are gonna inherit a lot of money, and they've got more money than they can launder. They have to like hide it, keep hiding it in different places. It's just stacks and stacks and stacks of money. I think the total at some point they say it was roughly like 80 million or so. So Walter and Jesse have had a permanent falling out, and Walter wouldn't even give Jesse his cut, his buyout of leaving the partnership with Mike and Walt. It was that bad, and Jesse's like, okay, fuck you, whatever. And Jesse basically just starts partying all the time, and he just doesn't care. He's totally disaffected. He's just kind of soulless, kind of, I don't know, an emptiness is kind of in him, and it's pretty tragic because basically, you realize that he is actually a good person. And Walter may have been a good person at one time, but he's really not anymore. And Um, but Walter does end up dropping 5 million on Jesse. But here's the problem. So now they're settled, and Walter gets out. He quits the business, and Todd keeps the lab going for Sylvia. And that's it. He's got his money. Of course, he's done all this stuff, and so far nothing can be traced to him. And of course, Saul is still kind of helping him out. But and there's some other subplots like Skylar's affair with Ted, and it's complicated. But basically, halfway through season 5 is where the show completely changes. Really, it flips because it's just flipped to where Walter's finally successful at what he's ostensibly been trying to do this whole time, which is make enormous amount of money to leave his family when he dies because he knows his cancer will come back at some point. Well, just by pure chance, um, Hank happens upon a piece of evidence, a book left to Walt by Gale, and they already had Gale's notebooks that were left there after Jesse murdered him. Never solved that murder. But they do, think it was related to Gustavo Fring, etc. And of course, Fring now has been outed as the mastermind, and everyone assumes he's the mysterious, legendary Heisenberg. So again, it heats off Walter completely. He's successful. He's out. Him and Jesse are quits, and Jesse's not that happy, but he's living his life, and Walter kind of is happy. He's gone straight. He's doing the car wash, and his health is still holding up. But anyway, Hank finds this Walt Whitman book inscribed to Walter White by Gale, and compares the handwriting to Gale's notebooks they confiscated. And so that's the thing we've been dreading happening all along. And I didn't know this. I didn't know this. I thought at the time I was watching this, I thought season 5 just ran all the way through. So my dear friend Sean Lee Levin told me that they shot these and then they staggered them to where like the first 6 episodes, I guess, or 7, I don't know, or no, maybe it was more than that. He'd have to correct me. 9, 10, I don't know. In season 5, they aired as one season, like part 1, season 5, part 1, and then a year later broadcast part 2 of season 5. I don't know why they didn't make them season 6. But this season had a total of 16 episodes, whereas all the others, besides season 1, had 13 episodes this season. So anyway, from here it's just downhill, really. You're just marking time. Hank figures it all out, and Skylar gets in trouble, and basically Walter's just trying to keep a step ahead of all this, and planning for him and Skylar to split. And finally, Hank's wife finds out, Skylar's sister. She's a really great character, Marie, played by Betsy Brandt, really great actress. And I don't know, I mean, Hank doesn't have the evidence he needs, but him and his buddy Steve Gomez, his partner, are still trying to get what they can. They know it's Walt, and he's confronted Walt. I mean, Walt hasn't really denied it, but he's pretty much like, I'm never going to see the inside of a prison cell. You don't have any evidence, and I'm going to be dying, in about a year anyway, probably, or less. So it's a weird dynamic. It's not quite as oppressively tense as I thought it was going to be. It plays out pretty well. Walt Jr., or Flynn, as he calls himself, their son with cerebral palsy, he still does not know the truth. And that's the person who Walter really has the biggest soft spot for. So it's another tragic, situation. So I've played out all the plot. So I'll just fast forward enough to let you know things you already know, because I'm sure everyone watching this has seen the whole show way before I have. But eventually there's like a showdown in the desert, and Walter has employed this white supremacist group. Todd, the cook, his uncle, is is the leader of one, Jack, and they have like Nazi tattoos. They're kind of rednecks, kind of like a lot of Nazi skinheads I used to be here in Charlotte. You know, kind of rednecks, you know, into swastikas and Nazism, and they're racist, but they're kind of morons. But these guys are, you know, a lot more dangerous than the Charlotte skinheads were. Um, and you know, they're kind of like, you know, they're hired killers. They're into all of it. They're all ex-cons. And so um, Walt finally he orders a hit on Jesse because Jesse has now told Hank everything. So Walt seemingly now is going to finally kill Jesse. I have Jesse killed, and so the fondness he had for him is kind of gone for the moment. And of course, Jesse has none for Walt anymore, and that's kind of sad because previously Walt never wanted Jesse to get hurt. He went to great lengths to save Jesse's life more than once, and to bargain for his life with these other shady figures they were dealing with, and get him the gig assisting him under Gustavo. But not anymore. You know, he sees Jesse kind of, I guess, as a traitor. Um, he wants Jesse, you know, eliminated, and unfortunately, everything backfires. Um, they're all in the desert, and it's the same spot where they first cooked their first batch in the RV in episode 1, and one episode begins with kind of a flashback to that episode. And I think some of the footage is actually from the episode, and then some is kind of newly shot and inserted within it. So they have to kind of do, you know, stuff with the makeup and the hair, how much Walt and Jesse's appearances have changed, and are going to continue to change. To make a long story short, Hank figures it out, and he gets Walt to surrender. So it's like, wow, you know, what next? And you know, Walt had called off this hit, and unfortunately, Jack took it seriously. You know, he had Walter's money, and he's like, let's do the job, man. And so these guys all ride out to the desert, and this giant shootout ensues. Steve Gomez is killed, Hank is injured, and Walt is still in handcuffs, and he's pleading for Hank's life. Them not to kill him, to let him go. They're going to make a deal with the money. He's going to give almost all the money to Jack if he'll walk away and not kill Hank. And of course, you know, nobody's sure where Jesse is, and he's scrambled away apparently. And Jack just is like, "Fuck it," you know, this cop, you know, and he blows Hank away. So Hank is gone. So Walt's biggest obstacle is gone. And these guys rip off Hank. He has all these barrels of money, like 7 or 8 barrels of filled with cash. So that's the 80 million, and it's buried in this area. And that's kind of what the setup was. Is Jesse set up Walt to come out there, thinking because Jesse pretended like he was going to be burning all of Walt's money. Well, it turns out Walt does spot Jesse, and he's under Walt's car, hiding from all the bullets. And this gang, you know, they're no longer just, you know, messing around and, you know, these kind of, you know, goofy Nazi, I don't know, hillbilly guys. You know, they really show their evil side, and they steal all but 1 barrel of Walt's money, and they take Jesse with them. And of course, they still haven't killed Jesse. That was part of the agreement, but it gets worse. So everything kind of hits the fan, and ultimately Walt becomes, you know, as expected, an outlaw. And you know, everyone finds out. They think he killed Hank. He didn't. He tries to tell Skylar, but she doesn't really believe him. He tries to get Saul's help, and even Saul, so much is going on, Saul kind of is decided to call in this guy he keeps referring to, who can give you a new life anywhere for a huge amount of money, new name, no one will ever find you. And Walt was going to take him up on it one other time, and that's Skylar had taken their money and reallocated it to Ted for a while. But this time, they decided to go with it. And so some time passes. Um, the final episode, well, the final two episodes. The next to last episode, we're not sure how much time has passed at first, but Walt's hair has grown back. He's got a beard. Looks pretty haggard. He's got the cancer again. Uh, but he's taken the deal, and so apparently is Saul. They don't show where Saul goes off to. Um, and Walt wanted to kill off the Nazi gang before split and get his money back. And everyone was basically like, you need to just cut and run. And he really doesn't have a choice. So what we find is that now he's living in this cabin in the snow in New Hampshire, and the fix-it guy who can arrange, you to disappear and have a permanent new identity is this cat played by Robert Forster, one of my favorite actors, who passed away not long ago. He was in Twin Peaks, so of course he's cool with me. But he was in tons of other great things: Jackie Brown, Vigilante, and Walking the Edge, and Reflections in a Golden Eye. And he's an actor, and rest in peace. And so he plays this guy, and he, as usual with his parts, he's very human, very likable. And he takes Walter's money, Walter's giving him, and tends to him. He keeps him alive in this sequestered area under the new name of Mr. Lambert, and life goes on. And Walt is now seen as a internationally wanted drug kingpin, and the family's broke, and Walt is he's cut off from everything, and a certain amount of time passes, and Walt does a couple of decisive things. He despite his failing health, he walks like 8 miles into this town that's nearby, the only nearby town, and he uses a payphone, and he, of course, uses his usual manipulative ways of doing things. And he manages to get his son on the telephone and tells him, "Hey, I'm going to mail this money to your friend, and it's going to be for you, though, and I want you to keep it. It's yours." And, Flynn flips out on him, hates him, and Walt's heart's kind of broken, but what do you expect? Then Walt also sets it up to where the DEA will arrive up there, and he makes a call from that payphone to them, and they track it. And so you're not sure what exactly he's going to do. But while he's in the bar, he has a drink, and he sees on television the Schwartzes. So we've kind of come full circle. And they've donated like $28 million to this meth rehab for kids in the Southwest, and they're just really kind of pretentious and full of malarkey. And it triggers Hank. He wants revenge. At first he was just going to be either like, I guess, stay out there or die or whatever. And maybe, I don't know why he called the DA. Maybe he was going to give himself up. He just wanted to go home and see his family before he died. But he kind of changes his trajectory upon seeing this. He decides, they're on the Charlie Rose show, by the way, and Charlie Rose plays himself. And Charlie Rose is really questioning them hard. And in real life, Charlie Rose would never be this hard on rich liberals. But I mean, it's a fictional show, but stunt casting. And, Walt manages to get a car, and he still has this box of money. And so he manages to go up to his cabin, get all his money, the barrel of money, and split. And he's taking off back to the Southwest, and he's going to get revenge on everyone before he dies. And he assumes Jesse's probably already dead. And he blackmails the Schwartzes. He gives them a huge amount of the money and says, "I want you to do this, give it to my son and daughter when my son's 18." And they're pretty hateful, especially Gretchen, and you really see the depth of which this kind of resentment that's been going on for a long time. And they agree because Walt makes them think they're going to be surveilled by hitmen day and night for, you know, however long it takes for them to do this, set it into motion. And hitmen really are just these old buddies, the Badger and Pete or whatever, who he's found their services and paid them some money to, um, you know, use these little uh, laser light things that they think are, sights on a hitman's rifle, sniper's rifle. And, they're kind of like, I don't know, this is some sleazy, shady shit, man. I don't feel that good about this. And then Walt hands them, like, big stack of money. And he's like, how do you feel now? And they're, we're feeling better, man. It's getting more positive. So they happen to slip that the blue meth is still out there. But Jesse's gone to Alaska. So nobody knows what's happened with Jesse. We know that, the blue meth is being made by Todd for Lydia. And this has rolled on, this business has rolled on for, it's been a couple of years. I would say between the point where Hank dies, maybe, yeah, because his son's about to turn 18 in a few months. Last we heard, his son's age was 16 or so. So, yeah, maybe a year, 1 to 2 years. And, he's been out there, let's say at least a year. And so he's coming back. And he visits Skylar, and he says a proper goodbye to her and to his daughter, who's now a little older, has hair and everything. But he starts saying, everything I did for you. I mean, everything I did was for. And she's like, I don't hear you anymore talking about I did all this for the family. And Walt's like, no, I did it for myself. I was good at it, and I felt alive. And that was just an amazing acting moment for Cranston, man. It was like, wow. So, this was his way really of feeling powerful after having a powerless existence. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. Not that we would go to Walter's extremes, certainly, but he's kind of a broken. He's been kind of a broken man, living in total solitude and just having Robert Forster visit him once a month, But the thing with Schwartz, that's the thing. When Walter wants to enact a plan, he sees it through to the very end, and he meticulously plans it out. So he uses the money he has left to do a bunch of things. He buys a bunch of some automatic weapons and figures out kind of a way to make them rotate. It's kind of like his little Gatling gun he builds, and so we're kind of going into Django territory here. I mean, the original Django with the machine gun, the real Django, Franco Nero. And you think, well, this is going to be epic. So where's Jesse? And you see Jesse is alone. You think maybe he's in Alaska. He looks really fresh and happy and clean, and he's built this box. And in one of the episodes where he's at NA, he talks about how he built this box, and he kept making it over and over to make it perfect. But then he traded it for some drugs because they were trying to find Jesse a purpose, in life, and maybe making things was his. And he's so happy with this box, and then you see it's like a dream, and Jesse is still under the thumb of the white supremacist gang. He's like a slave. His hair's grown long. He's dirty. They've beaten him up countless times. He gets beat up so much for this whole show, it's wince-inducing. He's not a physically powerful or imposing person, and I think really sometimes it's really hard to watch. But man, it's very realistic. I mean, there's no like heroic, save the day when Jesse gets in trouble. He gets fucked up by really bad people, and he gets fucked up by Walter, and a lot of that is psychological. And this time, at this point, he's just a slave, and he's making the blue meth. So Todd's, getting it together for Lydia, but I mean, Jesse's really the cook. So, but there are people who think Heisenberg is still out there and he's doing it. Nobody knows. All rumors, and Walt's been up on a icy mountain in New Hampshire for a year, so he didn't know. He didn't have internet or phone or anything. Just an occasional newspaper. So uh, Walt decides to just pull off his final plan, and see, he doesn't really know. I mean, you kind of get the impression that he thinks he's going to try to kill Jesse for making his product or taking it, but then you're not sure. I mean, Walt's so unpredictable. You don't know if he still has a soft spot for Jesse. So much time has passed, and he's changed again and again. And basically, we have like the final episode, and it's unbelievable. He puts everything in motion to where he has no more money, and he sets up a deal with Lydia and Todd to cook for them so he can make more money, and they'll give him sanctuary. And Lydia agrees, pretends to go along with it, and she's always at this one cafe like at the same time every week, and she uses a lot of stevia, that weird artificial sweetener. And I always think of my ex-girlfriend Stevie when I think of stevia. And I had this feeling because Walt had gone to his old house, and we'd seen in last season, the season before this, that he had hidden that ricin capsule after Saul gave it back to him, and he finds where he had it, and it's still where he secreted it, and that's the right word. I kind of guessed that, that was the end of Sylvia. He was going to poison her stevia, and turned out I was right. I guessed right on this one. But he sets up all the other guys to meet with him, and he's like telling them, I want my money, and they're like, we're not going to honor any deal with you, and he basically tells them, he's going to kill them. I mean, they're telling him they're going to kill Walter, keep his money, fuck Walter, and then they drag out Jesse, who he thinks is their partner, and then he realizes Jesse is like their slave, and Jesse's really pitiful, and Jesse and Walter see each other, and I don't know, there's just nothing said, but it's just these two actors are like titans. And Walter has this little keychain, and obviously I get the idea. Seeing it immediately, it's important to Walter, and it's probably some James Bond like thing he's rigged up. And I was right. He had insisted on parking his car right in front of the house, the den where all the Nazis are. And he jumps on Jesse, and you think he's attacking him, and they're fighting, and Todd tries to break them up, but actually he's saving Jesse's life because he presses that key thing, and his machine gun apparatus pops out of the trunk of his car, and then the Django thing goes on. Everybody's killed. There's, hundreds of bullets, and Todd is not killed. Jack is kind of barely alive. All the others are completely wiped out, like a dozen guys or whatever. And Jesse strangles Todd to death with the chains that Jesse has to carry around with him. So he's kind of, reverted to this animalistic level. And, it's a rewarding moment, though, for me. Todd, has this kind of boy next door, chipper kind of look and demeanor, but he's really done evil things. I mean, he killed that kid, and he also killed Andrea. I don't think Jesse ever found that out. He shot her in the back of the head, and I guess she knew too much or whatever. But loose ends from when they kidnapped Jesse. And one thing, when Jesse and Walt parted last before this reunion, you could call it, Walt hated Jesse for betraying him to Hank. And Walt, just to hurt Jesse, as Jesse's being dragged away by the Nazi gang, he tells him, I let Jane die, and could have saved her, but I let her die. I was always dreading that was the one secret, because well, first Jesse had already found out about the poisoning and the flour thing, and through Saul Goodman, and another reason he hated Walt and wanted to get Hank's help bring Walt down. That's all he wanted, was to bring Walt down, and they were going to offer him a deal. Hank was setting it all up, but like I said, it all spectacularly ends in Hank and Steve's death, and Jesse being taken away, and Walter finally, to sting him, uh, gives him that other bit of information, and so now all the secrets are out. Uh, and it's like another way to break Jesse even further. So when they meet again a year or two later, it's not under the not the friendliest of circumstances, but he does save Jesse's life, and Jesse does kill Todd, and Walt Walt gets his revenge. He Jack is like, you kill me, you're not going to find out where your money is, and Walt blows his head off, and then calls Lydia and tells her, hey, you're sick, so I've poisoned you, you're going to die. And so then you bad Walt and Jesse, and that's when it gets really emotional, because they look at each other and there's this ever so slight nod and kind of glint in both of their eyes. Um, think of all the stuff they've gone through together, and they were kind of like family. They were like friends, enemies, partners, co-workers, antagonists, co-conspirators. It's really a unique dynamic. These two people thrown together, by fate, and how it changed both of them so thoroughly over and over, irrevocably. And so Jesse drives away and he breaks through the gates and it's on to freedom. And again, you have the close up on Aaron Paul. He's crying. But now he's got like a beard and long hair, and he's those eyes, man. He's just, probably some people are, oh, he's got really pretty eyes. Well, they're very expressive, and he knows how to use them and how to get your tenderness toward him. It's gonna make me cry. So it's just, you're happy that he's finally free, and I really did cry through the last 20 minutes of this show, and this is only a couple hours ago. So Walter, the cops are coming, and Walter did get hit by a bullet in the fray, but he could have probably gotten taken care of, if he'd let himself be arrested and taken for help, and then who knows how long he would have lived. No money anymore, and the cancer's kind of going full bore, but he settled his scores, and he kind of goes out like a man, and it's not necessarily a man you totally admire and respect, but somehow they make you understand the writing and the performing. Um, it's pretty emotional, and he, waiting for the cops to come, and he knows he's probably going to die, and he just kind of lets himself bleed out, and he tours the meth lab that Todd and Jesse have been working in for Lydia, and picks up the gas mask, and he puts his hand on the tank, and he slips away, bloody fingers, and then he's gone, and he's just, we kind of see him from above. This great shot, his eyes are open, he's dead, and it's like, so we've kind of seen this one guy's, well, two men really, but especially at the very end, because Jesse did live, and we've seen this man's life play out before us over this time, and sorry, it's really powerful stuff. I don't know, it's just, it really affected me hard. So I'm not really embarrassed, but I mean, I've talked about some pretty intimate stuff on here, and I've probably almost cried over that, and I've probably almost cried over some other shows and things, but this one really kind of, this is about like the closest I'm probably going to get to just bawling on camera to date. Um, it's over, and I don't know. I think it's one of the most powerful works in the history of television. You know, maybe of filmed fiction. You know, it's I don't know. It's a magnum opus. It's a great work. Capital G, capital W, and wow. I guess it's Vince Gilligan's great work. Like Twin Peaks was David Lynch's great work, and you know, of course, I think of Kelly and her magic and her videos on the your journey, your great work through life, your magnum opus as an alchemist, and you know what you create from nothing in this world, and magic is art, you know, and it's life and sex and death, and it's all the same, you know. It's all like she used to tell me, it's all the same energy. So that's my comments on Breaking Bad. It's my longest video ever. I promise I won't make one this long again. I didn't mean to go into so much laborious detail of the plot points. I just kind of like I'm replaying them in my mind and trying to get things straight. And I went off on a lot of tangents, but I'm pretty happy with the tangents I went off on because I did want to give other information and other perspectives and just really kind of how I felt about this work. So now you've got like with this, you've got like, you know, 2.5 hours of me talking about Breaking Bad, a 5 season show, and that's pretty much left its mark on the world. And, you know, like Walter White and the next to the last shot is it's left its bloody fingerprints behind on all of us. So I will talk to you soon.